Books make you hope. Books make you dream. Books make you laugh. Books make you scream. This is the Books That Make You show, discussing books with authors and experts, unraveling the inner pages of all the books that help make us who we are. Hosted by Desiree Duffy.
Welcome to Books That Make You. We're talking about books that make you want to write. Let's face it, reading makes many of us also want to write. If you enjoy stories, chances are you may want to be a storyteller yourself. Writing and reading go hand in hand like peanut butter and chocolate. One consistent piece of advice writers get all the time is that they should also be reading. Read within your chosen genre. Read outside your genre. Read the classics, read contemporary, read books, graphic novels, short stories, magazines, blogs. Just read. Our guest is someone who knows a thing or two about writing and reading. He is a screenwriter, and he is a host of the hit podcast, Seated at the Writer's Table, and he's an avid reader. It's Phil Giangrande. Welcome to the show.
Well, hi.
Hi. It's so wonderful to have you here.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I really appreciate you having me on. I love this show, and you know, I've listened to. You've actually turned me on to a few different writers, which
cool.
has been a lot of fun for me.
That's high praise coming from you. You have an amazing show yourself, Seated at the Writer's Table. It's something that especially writers and screenwriters in particular enjoy listening to, because you really kind of pull together a lot of the topics and, you know, the people, the movers, the shakers, you know, that are, you know, making the stories right now in Hollywood.
Yeah, the whole idea of the podcast was to bring writers and directors and producers sort of all together on the show. I mean, I'll interview them separately, but we do. I also do a networking event that brings them all together. But the idea is to highlight sort of and educate people on the craft of writing, as well as the business side of writing in Hollywood, because they're almost equally important at this point. And it was an added bonus that I learn as I interview people. I'm still constantly learning new things, and I love that about it.
It's very ingenious, actually, because you're a writer yourself. You're a screenwriter, very talented, I might add. So you're able to pull in some of the top screenwriters and people in the business and learn from them as you're interviewing them.
That's right.
So that's really clever.
Thanks.
Good for you. We tend to talk about, obviously, books on the show, and so often books, it's the source material for so much that's out there right now. So tell me, why is it? Why do you think it's important for writers to also be readers, for them to also explore not only their own genre, but other genres? Like, why is that important?
Well, I can definitely tell you from the screenwriting side. I mean, and it's the same, I think, with books. Both when I was writing long form and writing chapters versus when I switched to screenwriting. What I do now and what I did to learn how to really change the type of writing, because they're two very different things, is reading scripts and watching the shows while I was reading the scripts to really see how visually it translates. What's on the page translated to what's on the screen. So what you start to see are sometimes mistakes that are made and things that you don't like. You identify what you don't like, and you certainly identify what you do like. And those are the challenges you have, and whenever you're reading, and especially as a writer, I tend to have a more difficult time explaining why I don't like something. So I'll be reading something and I'm like, this isn't grabbing me. It's not working. Why is it not working? And that is such a to be able to do that and then dissect it and really understand why it's not working for you is so valuable, because then you'll see it in your own writing and you'll avoid it. You'll even see it coming at you, you'll be like, oh, there's the trap. If I don't deal with this now, I'm going to fall into this trap that I didn't like when I was reading and that other script and watching that show. And that it's the same with books and same with, there's so many, I've interviewed a bunch of authors, and so much of it is knowing what,
don't falling into those trope traps.
Yes.
And yes. Yeah. Well, and here's the thing. People go to school to learn to write, to become screenwriters. They're taught, they're mentored. There's books about this. And I do want to talk about some of the books, the quintessential books for writers to read. But here's the thing. There's so many formulas out there. And I think that when people start falling into the formulaic approach, that's where you can see what's coming, and it becomes stale. It becomes predictable. Even have the Save the Cat is probably the most famous one.
Yeah.
And it's a brilliant premise. It's a brilliant book. It's a brilliant idea. And it's basically that if your hero saves the cat, and it's usually right away, that endears them to you. But sometimes, if you're like me and you see a save the cat moment and it's so obvious, you're kind of like, you're growing a little bit inside.
Well, so the problem is it's like any other technique that somebody first learns, right? You learn something new, you learn a new trick, and then you sometimes treat it like it's religious and it's and this is what's right. And
you force it.
And a formula like Save the Cat, which is very valuable, it's a great book, it's a great system, was designed because the writer of the books recognized that there are things that happen in good storytelling that naturally occur.
Right.
And you can. This is a great way to. If you're getting stuck and you're not sure why, you refer back to this and go, oh, well, maybe I can try this because this is where a natural story. This is where the story should naturally turn.
Sure.
But it was never meant to be like, here is this. I have to start with this, and let's build around this formula. And a lot of writers do that because they feel safe with that.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
By the book.
It's by the book, and it's and it's. I don't think it was ever meant to be used that way.
Right.
I think, and I still love it, and I use it when I'm in trouble.
Right.
When I'm writing
or
and
when
when
it
I'm
comes
going
naturally, when it's organic.
Right.
You know what? Not to sidetail too much here, but one of the best Save the Cat intros I've ever read is in Sean Patrick Travers' Gravesend. And the funny thing is, knowing that author, and I asked him about it, he's like, I didn't realize Save the Cat was a thing when I wrote it. And I think that's what makes it brilliant, because it's so organic. And in this, the cat is actually possessed by an ancient spirit. And the young girl saves him, and then they team up. So it's a very different approach to it, because it's not just the meow meow kitten in a tree. Just watched The Incredibles the other day, and he literally saves a cat in the tree. If you watch Hellboy again, he literally saves a cat. So sometimes when you're watching something like that, and you're just like, oh, of course he saved the cat. But yeah, when it's natural and organic, I think is when it can really work.
Yeah, and going towards books. I used to write more long form and short stories and books. And there was an author I would highlight the hell out of a book I was reading, because that stuff. It sort of seeps into your brain when you do that, and when you're acknowledging things that are new to you, that you're reading, that you like, and you may not, even if you could be reading all day long and learning all day long, right? Learning the craft of writing never ends, right? But you give yourself a good shot of retaining some of that information when you're reading a lot of other people's writings.
Yes.
And making notes of, oh, that's an interesting way. Wow, I would have never gone that direction. That's an interesting direction to go. And what, and then that will subconsciously stick with you. And when you're working on a story, you'll have this larger thing to draw from.
I believe if you truly love a book, especially a textbook or something that you are using to teach you, that it should be marked up and highlighted and dog-eared.
Oh,
and,
I don't even mean that. I do that with like one of my favorite fantasy writers is Stephen Donaldson. And I mean, he's way over flowery in some cases. I mean, I love him, but he can be super flowery. But some of the things that he does and some of the ways that he describes are super. So I have old books of his that are just highlighted. It's just fiction, but it's highlighted like crazy because when I was learning to write as a kid, I was going, oh, that's a much more interesting way to say he walked down to the end, to the tree line. He'll say it in a way that I go, oh, cool, and
yeah.
And I mean that's a simplified way of looking at it, but I mean that's the best way to learn how to write is to learn from the authors. Learn through reading. Learn from the authors, and I mean, there's all sorts of other tools. There's so many great interviews and podcasts and YouTube videos.
What are some of them that you like? Whether it's books or podcasts on writing, or instructors. Where do you feel people who want to learn to write? Where would you recommend they go?
Okay, so if I were for screenwriting, I can tell you for sure because that's just what I'm involved in mostly. So I obviously Seated at the Writer's Table is a great place for newer, younger writers in particular because I'm always trying to start from the beginning and go whenever I bring somebody in. Script Notes is an amazing podcast. So Script Notes is John August and Craig Mazin, and they're both great screenwriters, and John. I mean, he wrote Go and the Chocolate Factory, the reboot. And I mean, he's done tons of films that and they're so very good at giving screenwriting advice. For books, I love listening to Stephen King talk. So I will listen to every interview Stephen King has because he's so unpretentious about it, but everything he says is like, you just cut into that perfect piece of fruit, and you're going to take the nutrients from it, if that makes sense. I mean, he's just an amazing guy to listen to talk about writing.
And to read his book on writing, on writing as well. On writing
is right. He's a natural teacher. For somebody who's such a prolific writer, he's a natural teacher too.
Yeah. So because you interview so many great writers, what are some of the traits or similarities that you notice? Do they have like certain habits or philosophies? What are the things that you think sets a writer up for success?
So the biggest one is to not believe in writer's block.
Okay. Why not?
Because that's a crutch. Or, I mean, whether it is or not, everybody gets stuck. Of course, it's a real thing, but you give it weight when you call it writer's block, when you call it a block. And usually what that means is that you're either not being disciplined or you're being too disciplined. One or the other, and you're too in the middle of something, and you're driving yourself crazy, and you're running yourself in circles. Like there's a lot of reasons why you might be stuck somewhere. But and in some cases, like in my case, I'm a little ADD, so I will get writer's block or get stuck because I've been working on this one thing for a few hours and I'm bored. And my mind starts wandering. So I'm always working on multiple projects. So if I find myself it's taking too long for me to come up with something, I'll move on to another project or another portion of this project that I'm working on. So for example, I'm working on a sci-fi short script right now. If I'm working on a scene and I'm not getting it to where I want it to be, and I'm stuck for a while and it's starting to frustrate me, rather than say to myself, oh, I have writer's block, I say, well, where can I look for inspiration to make this scene better? So I'll start researching. And in this particular case, I went to researching brain mapping versus spirituality and the different, where those sort of coexist and where they don't. And I found some really great information. It sparked an idea for the scene. I went back to writing the scene. There's no block there.
So
There's
you don't just sit there and grumble at your keyboard saying, why can't I get past this? You're proactive. You go
or walk away from, I mean, you can walk away and watch a movie, and sometimes that's inspiring. There's all sorts of things. But I don't get it in my head that, oh, I'm just blocked, and I got to wait until the writer's block. Professional writers don't have time for that. You have to be productive.
Right.
So, and I don't believe in making it painful, where you're sitting there and you're, I'm just going to grind it out. I'm going to finish this scene, because that's painful. And writing is supposed to be fun. One of the other great things, and this tip was gold when I heard it, is to, if you're at the end of your session, sort of end your session in the middle of an idea. In the middle, even it's sometimes in the middle of a sentence, because and then wait until the next time. Don't finish that thought until the next time you're writing, because you will be, by the time you get back to that computer, you will be so excited to be working on it, and you'll have fresh thoughts, because you'll go to bed, or you'll go do your other thing, and that will be kicking around in the back of your mind, because where you want to go.
Yeah.
So your brain just naturally, subconsciously,
purposely making your own cliffhanger for yourself.
Exactly right. You're creating your own cliffhanger, and that for me is so much fun, because then you never feel like, oh no, I got to sit down and write. You're always like,
right.
Oh my God, I got to finish. Like, thank God I can sit down and finish this thing.
Yeah. I like that. That's a good one.
Yeah.
Okay, how about we're talking about tips and advice. What do you want to say to aspiring writers? What are some of the things that you want to, words of wisdom from Phil? What can you tell them?
Being able to sit down and create, in my mind, is one of the greatest things in the world. It's one of the things that nobody can ever take away from you, and it's an amazing luxury, and you will always find an audience. So don't ever get discouraged. If you like your writing, just because a publisher is not accepting you, if you're going after publishing, or a manager, you will get rejected. It doesn't matter. You're gonna find your niche. You're gonna find people who appreciate your writing, and so just don't ever stop. If you have that passion for it, don't ever let yourself be discouraged by it, because
there's an audience.
There's an audience, and there's ways to find them now on your own.
Especially nowadays. It was different 15, 20 years ago, where you were at the mercy, especially if you were a novelist, you were at the mercy of the publishers. Because if they didn't publish you, and heaven forbid back in those days if you did self-publishing, Howard Rosenberg, who used to be the TV critic for the LA Times, gave me sage advice, and this is about 15, 20 years ago, and he's like, don't self-publish your book. It's the equivalent of doing porn, is what he told me. But again, now look at how the times have changed.
Yeah.
You have such an opportunity to hit your audience if you self-publish. So even if you can't get picked up by that traditional publisher, there's ways for you to publish it yourself. There's Wattpad and other platforms out there where you can share your work. And there's a real robust writers community as well. I mean, even on Twitter. If you follow me on Twitter, also make sure you're following the hashtag writers community, because we're just hanging out and we're helping each other out and supporting one another. Well,
and I'm glad you kind of brought that up, because the other thing is, it takes time to build your community and your fan base. and it takes like work and it takes investment, but all of that pays off really in a big way. So when people talk about marketing or talk about building, getting somebody to read your book, or giving away a book, or doing contests or whatever, I always ask them when they seem like it's not worth it to do that. It's not worth it. I always say, well, really, what is a reader worth to you? Mm-hmm. Because they could buy the book. That's fine. That's, $10 or sometimes $5, sometimes $15, whatever that book is worth, fine. But if they like your book, there's a really good chance they're going to buy the next one and the next one, or more from you. So that one reader is now worth, maybe $30. Mm-hmm. Now, that reader, if you're in contact with them, and if they're part of, you make them part of your community, they're going to talk to other people about your book. Mm-hmm. So now let's say that one reader gets you another 20 readers. Well, now that one reader that you found is, and each of those people buy, one book. Now that reader that is worth $330.
Right.
He read 3 books. Everybody else, his community read, or $230. So you, and over time, those because each one of those people become big fans if you're staying in touch with your community, and they turn their friends on, or people that are onto your book. That first reader ends up maybe responsible for hundreds of other readers reading your book over time. So, you treat your fans really well. Mm-hmm. And that's a difficult thing to remember sometimes, because you get so busy when you're self-publishing, and you have so many things on your plate and so many things to take care of, that you forget that you're trying to get as many people to buy that book as possible, and you forget to cultivate the relationship between the people who actually went out there and bought it and are fans. If you cultivate that, it will be down the road, you will organically grow your fan base a lot quicker and a lot more effectively, and that's that to me is. You could, as a self-published author, you can have a career. You can make a living.
Absolutely.
Right?
Plenty of them doing it.
It's one of the reasons I like what you do so much, because you really facilitate this community of writers and readers. And so you have so much cross integration on your platform that it's for a writer. If I were a new writer doing books, this would be a no-brainer.
Thank you.
Yeah,
thank you.
For sure, without a doubt.
So let's talk a little bit, because you are primarily a screenwriter. Mm-hmm. And while many books are obviously adapted into screenplays or teleplays, the writing is very different. It's night and day. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about that a little bit. Let's talk about what it is that you as a screenwriter are doing differently than a novelist is doing.
Okay. Well, the first is economy of words. The idea with a novel is, you're being descriptive. There's value in really painting the picture and really describing thoughts and describing. With screenwriting, you can't describe a thought. Mm-hmm. There is none of that. There is subtext in the language, in the dialogue. So and when it comes to the description of the scene, like what's happening, there are a few things that you need to communicate that are important, like where everybody's standing and how, and maybe what the room the
Sure.
atmosphere is.
And you're trusting the potential director and the actors to
It's a
fill. Yeah,
yes.
you're giving them like this.
It's a visual medium. Right. So everybody else, with a book, it's you. You are creating the world.
You are God.
You are God, which is one of the appeals for being an author rather than a
Sure.
screenwriter. Because when you're a screenwriter, it is a community that's going to create the art. It's not just you. You're creating you're the germ, you're the seed. And then you have to trust, like just as you were saying, you have to trust the actors. You have to give them enough in the words that they can then do their craft on top of it. And the same with the director. So economy is super important, and subtext is super important, and cliffhangers there's a difference between doing a cable show versus a network show versus a streaming show. They all have different momentums and different pacings and different things that you're doing to move the story along. So it's a very different and specific type of writing.
It is. It's night and day, really.
It's night and day. Yeah.
Now, you mentioned the sci-fi short script that you're working on. Can you tell us about that, or what are you working on right now? What's on Phil's plate?
Okay, so I've got the sci-fi short, and it's really it's really going to be a feature. The short is a proof of concept, which means that it's sort of a teaser to sell the feature. But it can stand on its own, and it's another opportunity to get something on screen and get it into festivals and get it bought. So
to make people salivate and want more.
Yes,
basically.
Yeah. So I'm working on that with a young director and young producer and all of that. I have a script that's we're pitching to networks, and that's a 1 hour show, and we're in the midst of packaging it. So what packaging a script means is that you're attaching an actor, a main actor that has a name. You're attaching maybe a director, but a showrunner if you can. That's always a great thing. And then you're selling it to a network. The production company takes it to a network and they buy it and hopefully we'll put it on. I have a show we're doing that with. I'm actively working on a treatment for a 20s. It's for a film for a 20s Prohibition era type of unique version of what happened, and it's sort of pre-Al Capone, how it all sort of started. And I'm trying to think, what else am I working on actively? Then I've got a kind of a dramedy that I'm in the middle of writing. And I just got brought on to a project that it's an animated, very kind of quirky animated
cool.
TV
That
show.
sounds fun.
It's an idea that I had with a few people years ago, with two other guys years ago, and they just came back to me out of nowhere and was like, "All right, we want to do this."
Oh, cool.
And I said, "Okay."
And that's the cool thing too. So this is where I love your networking skills, because you network with so many people, and that's the thing, is a little gem of an idea, something, like you take the seed and you let it germinate for a while, and all of a sudden it comes back. You can germinate all these different projects. So
it's super important as a screenwriter, much more important as a screenwriter than as a novelist.
Sure.
But that's because we rely on a team, and we rely on getting it sold. An author, again, creates their own world and then just it tries to build a fan base. That's, they're out in a way. I'm very jealous of authors because of that. I would love that if I could do it all over again. Maybe I would have.
You'd go back and do it the other way. Well, maybe at some point in the future you'll be writing you'll be an author writing your book.
You never know.
So tell people, where can they find you online, your show? Give us everything.
Sure. you can go to seatedatthewriterstable.com. You can find me on Twitter at seatedwriters. You can find me on Instagram at writerphil. You can find me on Facebook at seatedwriter. At Seated at the Table. No, Seated at the Writer's Table. Trying to think of where else. I think that's probably
You're
it.
all over the
I'm
place.
all over the place. Yeah. Or you can Google my name. You can just Google Phil Giangrande and you'll find me.
Excellent. Phil, thank you so much for joining me. This has been a pleasure.
Sure.
And once again, my name is Desiree Duffy. Thank you for being with us today on Books That Make You. And you can find out more about Books That Make You. Just visit our website, and that's booksthatmakeyou.com. You can also follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Until next time, enjoy all the books that make you who you are. And stay positive here on mystar95.com with music for the soul.
The executive producer for Books That Make You is Desiree Duffy. Produced and sound mastered by Phil Giangrande. Engineering by Dave Nabox. Social media and promotion by Bree Sweeter. For more, visit booksthatmakeyou.com.